Hello and welcome along. So we're going to talk about the Gal Vorbak and Argel Tal. Now the Gal Vorbak are an elite formation within the word-bearers of the pre-heresy and heresy period. And Argel Tal was their commander. And he went on to become a very significant figure within the traitor forces for a time during the heresy. So let's start at the beginning. How did they come into being? It goes back to about 40 years before the heresy, when the Primarch Lorgar was desperately seeking some meaning to existence, some meaning to the universe, after having been brutally put in his place by the Emperor and Guilliman for worshipping the Emperor. After a time of a severe depression, essentially, he decided that he was going to go on some quest to determine what was really out there, because was there anything out there in the universe that was worthy of his devotion, something that would give meaning to his existence, because it was deeply programmed within his being to have a need for something bigger that he could place his faith in. Now, the Emperor had filled that position up until now, but with that ripped away from him, he was really searching for anything at all he could see as a deity, something that would, in his eyes, make existing worthwhile and give him some guidance on what he should be doing. And so after searching in various places, old manuscripts, various folk tales, etc., around the galaxy, particularly on his own homeworld, which had been a deeply religious world, he came to this idea that there was something out there, some kind of higher power, and the place to go to really find out was the Eye of Terror, well, or at least what we have come to know as the Eye of Terror in the current 40k world. So at that time, they just understood it as some kind of warp phenomenon that they didn't really understand, but he had determined that this was the place to go. Now, he was being manipulated from the background by Erebus, but that's not too relevant to the story. The point is, he decides to take the Legion there. Once he's on the edge of the Eye of Terror, he sends in one ship with one chapter of his Astartes to essentially explore and meet with whatever is on the other side, whatever's in there that can, in theory, give them some information about the true nature of reality. So he sends the Serrated Sons Chapter. Being dutiful followers of their Primarch, they don't hesitate to follow his orders. They go off into the Eye of Terror, and with the expectation of finding out some deep truth, hopefully, that they can report back to Lorgar. Once they are sufficiently far into the Eye of Terror, they are attacked and killed by a demon. And they awake on their ship to find that they had been killed, but were now revived somehow. So the Astartes all come back to life. All the other crew of the ship are killed. While they're dead, they are told the true nature of reality by this demon. And this is exactly what Lorgar's been looking for. So this is what they were sent there to do. This revelation of what is actually the nature of reality, and that there is these divine beings within the warp that potentially are exactly what Lorgar's been looking for. So now they have to make their way back out. Now the ship is quite badly damaged, and as I said, the crew are all dead, so it takes them a long time, but they slowly limp their way out of the Eye of Terror. Eventually, they get out, but during that time, it takes about 7 months to get out. They start turning on each other, they run out of food, they start drinking each other's blood, they start eating the corpses of their dead crew. It becomes a kind of a living nightmare for them. For those of us who now know the nature of chaos, this isn't too surprising, because any bargain struck with chaos always comes at a price, and this was essentially their price for the knowledge. They were given this knowledge, but they had to suffer to get it. They had to go through this terrible ordeal. They had to do things that they would never have imagined doing, committing murder of their comrades, reducing themselves to cannibals, disgracing themselves, basically crossing all of the lines that they would have had in their previous lives. And that's really what chaos does to people, and these Astartes were learning that for the first time. So eventually they get out of the Eye of Terror, and they report this back to Lorgar, and he's over the moon, as you can imagine, because he's like, wow, there really is something out there. There's some being that I can pledge myself to, I can learn from and validate my deep inner need for a faith in something. And so he's really happy with these Astartes. Obviously, he realizes they've been through this ordeal, and he sees that as a great mark of their conviction to both to him and this new way of thinking. But there's not many of them left right now, so something like 700 have died, so it leaves about 300, 3 functional companies, and the previous chapter master has also died. during this process. So he appoints Argel Tal, who is the captain of the 7th Assault Company within that chapter, to now be the new chapter master. And the chapter is basically an understrength chapter of 3 companies. And they are then given the name Gal Vorbak, which translates to the Blessed Sons. So the idea was that they had been blessed by this event. Now, it wasn't entirely clear what had happened to them at this point, but over time, they start to hear voices, they have hallucinations and dreams, and it becomes clear that they are each possessed by a demon. And they start to be able to communicate with their own demon. Each one has their own demon. The demons aren't all identical, they all have their own character and so on, and each Astarte is affected differently by the way that they interact with the demon and the level of interactions that they have and the level of control they can keep over themselves and things like this. And you've got to remember this is 40 years before the heresy when this starts. So there's quite a long period of them finding this stuff out, learning how to be a Gal Vorbak. And the full extent of being a demon-possessed Astarte doesn't really come out until the heresy, in fact, at the Battle of Isstvan V. During this time, they are considered an elite within the Wordbearer formations. They paint their armor red, a sign of their elite status. And Argel Tal becomes known as the Crimson Lord because of his red armor and because he commands the Gal Vorbak. And he develops a reputation of being a very competent and capable leader during this time as well. And he also really gains the trust of Lorgar, who really sees him as his most favoured son. So although there are others in the Legion who, in theory, are above him, like Erebus and Kharn, Lorgar starts to lose his faith in them because they are really in it for themselves, whereas Argel Tal is devoted to Lorgar. Now, of course, Lorgar himself actually has a longer journey into worshipping chaos or being corrupted by chaos, as he himself then goes to commune with the demon, to go and communicate with the powers of chaos directly. And that's really where he starts his personal journey into being corrupted by chaos. But it's that initial scouting mission by the members of what would be the Gal Vorbak convinces him there's something worth actually going to see himself. Now, eventually, the Gal Vorbak would be involved in Isstvan V. That's where the Wordbearers first openly fight as traitors. And in the build-up to this battle happening, the Gal Vorbak seem to be more and more transformed by their demon parasites. So these demons have been in their minds in the background before, and in some ways improving the way that they can fight, improving their senses and reflexes, strength, this kind of thing. But during the build-up to the battle, they start to mutate quite rapidly, and they fuse with their armor. They grow random spikes and claws, and they develop massive teeth in their helmets, and so essentially they become one with their power armor, and they gain considerably more strength and endurance, toughness, etc. The power of the demon increases their abilities well beyond that of a normal Astarte, and they become incredibly powerful, particularly in close combat. Now, they kind of lose the ability to use ranged weapons because they're so full of intense rage from the demon, a deep bloodlust, a yearning to just rip apart any being from the mortal realm. They can't really operate equipment anymore when they're in their extreme demon form. But in a close combat situation, they are absolutely deadly and will rip apart many Astartes with ease. Now, in their altered form, they take part in the battle, and really seeing that for many of the loyalists is the first realization that something seriously weird is happening here. You've got to remember the loyalists at Isstvan V have come to defeat Horus and the 3 legions aligned with him, but they don't know that there's another 3 legions that are supposed to be their allies that are going to attack them from the rear. And once that happens, one of those legions is the Wordbearer. At the forefront of the Wordbearer formation are these demon hosts who are rampaging through their ranks, ripping people apart. You can imagine the extreme psychological impact of suddenly seeing not only another 3 legions turning on you, and the realization that you're actually caught in a trap between the original 4 traitor legions and these other 3 traitor legions, and you're probably going to die, and almost everybody you know is going to die. Then you see these incredible, weird, demonic monsters rampaging towards you, something you probably couldn't even imagine appearing, that goes against everything you've thought of before. So you know that they are Astartes in a sense because they are part of the Wordbearer Legion, but obviously something incredibly weird is happening to them. So at this point, the Raven Guard, who bear the brunt of the Wordbearer attack, must be incredibly confused by the situation. Betrayed, outnumbered, outgunned, probably going to die. Then they see this monstrous creatures and that can't exist but do exist and are part of the Wordbearer legions, because of course this is all going on before most loyalists have any idea of what chaos is, or even that chaos is involved in any way in this rebellion. As far as they're concerned, it's just Horus becomes for some reason unhappy with being in the Imperium and wants to take the Emperor's place. It's a sort of an old-fashioned coup. It's a military leader gets too big for the boots and he decides, I'm going to be in charge. That's what they think's happened all the time, while they're receiving fire from the artillery of the Iron Warriors and probably an orbital bombardment as well by the massive fleet that's in orbit. So they don't really have much time to think at all. They're overwhelmed with physically and mentally by what's going on around them. During the battle, Corax and Lorgar end up fighting each other, and therefore the Gal Vorbak, who are with Lorgar, end up fighting Corax and his bodyguard as well. And a lot of them die, because although they're very powerful and can kill Astartes pretty easily, against Corax they don't stand much of a chance. So he kills a lot of them. They also fight very recklessly and without any real attempt to defend themselves, so they can be gunned down, overwhelmed by firepower, etc. And in fact, so many of them die that after the battle there's only about a squad size of them left. Argel Tal still survives, and he himself actually kills a custodian who was sent to watch over Lorgar after Lorgar was reprimanded by the Emperor for his Emperor worship. So Argel Tal is incredibly powerful compared to most Astartes, to the point where he can defeat the Custodies. After the battle, the surviving Gal Vorbak are able to turn back their human form, so the transformation into full demonic form is temporary. They gain their control over themselves back from the demon as well after the battle. But there are very few of them left, and so Lorgar, now having seen this is a kind of a proven concept of what they can really do, recruits many more of his Astartes into the Gal Vorbak. However, these new Gal Vorbak aren't as powerful as the ones that came out of the Eye of Terror, and so they are stronger or more powerful in some ways than an Astarte, but they're nowhere near as capable as the originals. But there are quite a lot of them produced, which brings the numbers back up to a reasonable size. And this force of Gal Vorbak, minus Argel Tal, are sent to the Battle of Calth, which is the next major engagement for the Wordbearers after Isstvan V. Now, Argel Tal is seconded to the World Eaters at this time. He commands the Wordbearer force that are with Lorgar during the Shadow Crusades, but he doesn't command the Gal Vorbak, because they are sent with Erebus and Kharn to Calth. Now, although Calth is in many ways a great success for the Wordbearers in killing so many of the Ultramarines, the vast majority of the Wordbearers involved in that battle do die, because they're essentially abandoned on Calth. And this turns out to be something that Lorgar kind of planned from the start, because he wanted to purge his legion of those who were not really loyal enough to him and were too obsessed with the hatred of the Imperium and of the Ultramarines, and were too eager to follow Erebus and Kharn. And so those members of the Gal Vorbak, who were by and large these new Gal Vorbak, were very much those kind of people, as well as the wider force that was sent there from the Wordbearers. And so they were left to die, and the Gal Vorbak essentially went extinct at that point. However, this wouldn't be the end of the concept of the Gal Vorbak, an idea of using a possessed Astarte to be an elite within the Wordbearers. Now, without the rest of the Gal Vorbak, Argel Tal decided that he would raise a new force, and he got permission to create a new chapter. The original Gal Vorbak came from the Serrated Sons Chapter. That chapter was allowed to go extinct, and he created this new chapter, which would be called the Vraal. These Astartes essentially replaced the Gal Vorbak in the elite position within the Legion, led by Argel Tal. They became Lorgar's personal guard, if you like, not just a bodyguard, but an elite force that would fight around him. And Argel Tal became closer and closer to Lorgar, more and more trusted by him, and he also became very close to first Captain Kharn of the World Eaters, who would go on to become Kharn the Betrayer. So they developed this very strong friendship where they first respected each other's military abilities, but they also realised that they had some kind of kindred spirit as well. And in fact, they grew so close that Argel Tal's had a powerful influence over Kharn and was stopping Kharn from losing himself in his rage, in the effects of the butcher's nails, and going down that path to becoming the betrayer, becoming this complete berserk lunatic. Because Argel Tal had this kind of calming influence on him, Kharn liked to be around him, but also it meant that Erebus, who survived the Battle of Calth, saw Argel Tal as a barrier to Kharn reaching his full potential as a servant of the Dark Gods. And so he betrays them both and stabs Argel Tal in the back and kills him. He uses a ritual blade, so he's able to kill him, even though Argel Tal, being extremely powerful, could have easily killed Erebus. He is taken by surprise with this stab in the back, and because it's a ritual blade, it wounds him even beyond the abilities of his demon that's possessing him to heal, and so he dies. So the relationship between Erebus and Argel Tal is actually quite a long one, because Argel Tal was inducted into the Legion by Erebus and was expected to become a chaplain at some point, but he turned his back on that path and became a line officer. And so there was always a little bit of something, some sort of bad blood between the two of them. Now, although there's no hint that Erebus killed him for that reason, he wasn't trying to get a petty revenge on him for not becoming a chaplain, it did mean their relationship was a bit deeper, more complex than just simply, oh, he's a barrier to Kharn becoming some sort of berserk monster, I'm just going to stab him in the back. There were layers to this, as all things are with involving Erebus. The Vraal, who Argel Tal had created, would survive his death and remain as an important part of the Wordbearers' Legion and an elite within the Legion for the rest of the heresy. They had the distinctive red armour of the Gal Vorbak, but that had kind of spread amongst the Legion anyway. Members of the Legion saw it as a kind of status symbol of being more devoted to Lorgar, more devoted to the powers of chaos, etc. The red armour kind of just spread amongst the Legion, so it wasn't really a signifier anymore of just being in the Gal Vorbak, or later the Vraal. They wore a sort of a faceplate which kind of marked them out, and they also had special weapons and other war gear made for them, including wrist-mounted flamers and things like this. So they became quite distinctive in other ways to mark them out as an elite still within the Legion. They also experienced specialist training within the gladiator pit of the World Eaters, and so they developed a level of close combat skill beyond what the normal Astartes of Wordbearers had. They were selected for the characteristics of being most devoted to Lorgar, and so they were an elite in all senses within the Legion, and they could then function as his honour guard, his bodyguard, and his most trusted weapon when he needed it. So the broader context of the chaos possessed would spread amongst the other legions. So some of the other legions would have these Astartes within their forces, but no one did it quite the same way as Lorgar had, and no one did it as early as Lorgar did, and no one did it in quite the same way as he had. And the abilities of those original Gal Vorbak were well beyond those of later possessed Astartes. And although those originals didn't last long in the heresy, they had been around for quite some time, so they were important within the Legion for that 40-year period during the build-up to the heresy, where the Wordbearers were really the only traitor legion at that time. Just no one knew that they were traitors. And as for Argel Tal, their original commander, this is one of those tragic stories of the heresy period where really he was the best of the Wordbearers. He was in both character and ability, and he was betrayed by his own legion in Erebus. He was led down a path by his loyalty to his Primarch, Lorgar, which he didn't really want to go down, and he wasn't a bad person like many of the traitors who saw turning to chaos as an opportunity to just do the bad things they wanted to do anyway. He did the things he did out of loyalty to Lorgar and the Legion. He constantly had this internal conflict of who he was as a person and what he was doing. And I think had Lorgar remained loyal, he certainly would have been a loyalist, and he would have been probably one of the more prominent loyalist commanders. In an alternative history where the Wordbearers were one of the loyalist legions, he may well have been a key in stopping the heresy or defeating the heretics. Well, not only was he a good man, a good character, he was actually a very good commander, which is actually relatively rare amongst the Wordbearers. Not the best military commanders, probably because of their gene seed with Lorgar. And also the way that the Legion was at that time, particularly with their devotion to chaos, many of the commanders of the Wordbearers let that side of themselves distract them from their military duties, and they would often do things in a very ineffective way because they wanted to capture people and they wanted torture people and perform chaos rituals, etc., rather than actually think about the military tactics that needed to be implemented to actually win a battle. Whereas Argel Tal was able to do that. Ironically, when you think he was actually possessed by a chaos demon that would constantly fight for control over his body, he was one of the more controlled of the Wordbearer commanders. Okay, so that is the story of the Gal Vorbak and Argel Tal. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've read the novel Betrayal, I think it gives you very good insight into Argel Tal and his relationship with Kharn. If you've watched my previous video about Kharn before he became the Betrayer, that will also give you some deeper insights into their relationship. Let me know if there's any other characters of the heresy period that I haven't already covered that you'd like me to do a separate video on. And otherwise, please like, subscribe and share, and I will see you next time.